You really think you're Harvard material? The words sliced through the dinner table chatter like a blade. My sister, Camille, smirked over the rim of her wine glass, her eyes gleaming with the kind of cruelty that only family can sharpen to a deadly edge. Dad, tell her. She's barely keeping up in community college. Let's be real. Silence followed. I stared at my mashed potatoes like they might offer me an escape route. My hands were clenched under the table, nails digging crescents into my palms. The dining room of my parents' 5-bedroom colonial in Charlottesville, Virginia, suddenly felt too bright, too sterile. The chandelier above us hummed softly, mocking the storm it illuminated. Dad cleared his throat. Camille, that's enough. But he didn't deny it. He didn't say I was smart. Or hardworking. Or that maybe, just maybe, I deserved a shot. Camille just laughed and leaned back in her chair like she owned the place. As she did. Not literally but emotionally. Every wall in this house echoed her trophies. Every framed photo in the hallway featured her smile at the center. Valedictorian. Varsity tennis. Georgetown Law. Class of 2021. She was the daughter with the golden resume. Me. I was just trying to find my path. Which was a polite way of saying she's lost. She's behind. Is not Camille. My name is Arden Calloway. I'm 20 years old. I live in a house where I'm invisible unless I'm being humiliated. And last night at my own birthday dinner, my sister made sure I knew exactly where I stand in this family. No one came to my defense. Not Mom, who sat frozen, smiling that nervous, forced smile she wears when Camille starts slicing people open with her tongue. Not Dad, who pretended to be focused on cutting his steak. Even my grandmother just sighed and reached for the wine bottle like this was just another performance of the Camille show. I excused myself before the cake. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection under the harsh vanity lights. My lipstick had smudged, my eyes were glassy, and my chest burned with something sharp and unrelenting. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't jealousy. It was rage. That moment, right there staring at the girl in the mirror who everyone thought would never make it, was the first time I realized. They were all going to eat their words. They didn't know about the letter in my desk drawer. The one with the Harvard crest on it. They didn't know I had spent the past year working in secret with an advisor, studying for the LSAT in the public library between shifts at the campus coffee shop, building an application so tight it made my knuckles bleed. And they definitely didn't know what I had planned next. But they would. Oh, they would. I wasn't supposed to be the disappointment. When I was little, I was the one who built model rockets in the garage and stayed up late teaching myself how to code on a secondhand laptop. I was the kid who read court transcripts online just for fun, who once talked my way out of a parking ticket at 16, and actually made the officer laugh. But somewhere around my junior year of high school, things shifted. Camille got into Georgetown on early decision. I didn't get into my first choice school. She won the state debate championship. I got bronchitis and missed prom. One success after another stacked in her corner, while my life started collecting dust in the attic of my parents' attention. It wasn't that I didn't care. It's that I stopped trying to prove I did. By the time I enrolled at Blue Ridge Community College, it was like my name came with a sigh. Arden. They'd say it with a little frown, like I'd left the oven on again. My parents called it a practical choice. But I could hear the unspoken words. Safe. Local. Easy. What they didn't see, what they refused to see, was that I chose Blue Ridge because I needed a year to rebuild. Quietly. Without anyone watching for me to fail. I moved out at 19 and got a studio apartment on the edge of downtown Charlottesville. Above a diner that smells like burnt coffee and bacon grease 24/7. The floors creak. The heater wheezes. The shower pressure is a joke. But it's mine. And in that tiny, imperfect space, I started becoming the version of me they never expected. My days were a blur of classes, work, and study groups. At night, I'd sit under the flickering track lights in my kitchen, poring over LSAT prep books and case studies. I stopped checking Camille's social media. I stopped measuring my worth against the highlight reel of someone who never once asked how I was doing. I studied like I was starving. Because in a way I was. Hungry to prove that I wasn't the weak link in the Calloway family. That I wasn't the footnote in someone else's story. And when the early decision deadline for Harvard Law School rolled around, I clicked submit, with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't tell a soul. Not even my best friend Juniper, who FaceTimed me every other night and could spot a lie in half a syllable. This wasn't about being cheered on. This was about doing something no one thought I could. And then standing in the doorway one day, acceptance letter in hand, and watching their faces shift from smug to stunned. That was the plan. But even I couldn't have predicted just how perfectly it would all unfold. Most days started at 6:30 a.m., with the sound of my neighbor's dog barking through the paper-thin walls and the hiss of the old radiator heating up like it resented the idea of work. I'd throw on my apron, grab a protein bar and jog down the back stairs to the coffee shop 2 blocks away, Steamhouse Cafe. The manager, Declan, was in his 40s with a sleeve of tattoos and a soft spot for underdogs. He hired me without a resume after I fixed the store's glitching iPad register on my first day. It wasn't glamorous. Mopping floors, steaming milk, smiling through customers who snapped their fingers when we didn't move fast enough. But it paid the rent and bought me just enough silence during the slower hours to review flashcards behind the counter. From 7 to noon I was Arden the barista. From 1 to 4 I was Arden the student, cramming business law and poli-sci into my brain at lightning speed. Then came the library. My second home. I'd slide into my usual spot in the back corner, the one near the dusty radiator and the water-stained ceiling tile, and disappear into logic games, reading comp drills and LSAT practice tests until the staff shut the place down. There were no parties, no boyfriend, no vacations, just books, burnout and a quiet fury driving me forward. On paper my life looked unimpressive, community college, part-time job, discount textbooks from the used shelf. But what no one saw were the long nights, the extra credit essays, the independent research papers I submitted to professors just for the feedback. I wasn't building a transcript. I was building a case. Piece by piece I crafted a personal statement that didn't try to hide my flaws. I wrote about falling behind. About watching my sister soar while I floundered. About sitting in a family of type A overachievers and wondering if something was broken in me. And then I wrote about fighting my way back. I gathered recommendations from professors who had seen me cry in their offices, then watched me turn in A+ final projects 3 weeks early. I uploaded scanned versions of every award I'd won since enrolling at Blue Ridge, including the academic excellence scholarship I'd earned last semester. And I waited. Weeks passed. My hands shook every time I checked my email. I'd wake up in the middle of the night convinced I'd missed something, that a deadline had slipped by, or a glitch in the application portal had deleted my files. But the confirmation came. Not from Harvard, not yet. From the LSAC status page, which updated in the middle of a Tuesday shift. Application received. Under review. I remember standing in the break room, clutching my phone like it might vanish if I blinked. Declan walked in, saw my face and just nodded. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. Somehow he knew. After everything, every insult at family dinners, every time I was talked over, dismissed, ignored, I was in the running. I hadn't told Camille. I hadn't told my parents. They still thought I was taking a break until I figured it out. What they didn't know was that I'd already figured it out. And I was about to turn their version of my story into dust. The acceptance letter didn't arrive with fireworks. No trumpet sound. No magical music playing in the background. Just a soft ding on my phone. I was in the cereal aisle at a Kroger just off Monticello Avenue, trying to decide between store-brand granola and the one with dried cherries I couldn't really afford, when my phone buzzed. Subject line: Harvard Law admissions decision. My fingers froze mid-reach. For a full 5 seconds I just stared at the screen. The world around me blurred. The toddler crying 2 aisles over. The squeak of a cart with a busted wheel. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I tapped the email. My thumb slipped twice. I had to wipe my hand on my hoodie to steady it. I opened the message. Congratulations. I read it 3 times out loud in a whisper so soft it was barely breath. Congratulations. 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 My knees nearly gave out. I pressed my forehead against the cart handle. I must have looked insane, half laughing, half crying next to boxes of cereal, but I didn't care. Because I did it. The girl who everyone said was a little behind had just gotten into one of the most prestigious law schools in the country. Me. Arden Calloway. The disappointment. I wanted to scream. To run out of the store barefoot and wild and tell the whole damn world. But instead I picked up a $2 chocolate bar from the checkout line, walked home in a daze and sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor while it snowed outside. For the first time in years I felt like I existed. I let myself have that moment. One night. Just for me. The next morning I printed the acceptance letter on heavy paper, slipped it into a red envelope and sealed it with trembling fingers. I wasn't going to mail it. I was going to deliver it in person, next Sunday, at brunch where my family always gathered for Camille's post-church updates. They'd all be there. Mom, Dad, Grandma Louise, and of course Camille, fresh from yoga or bar or whatever polished thing she did to keep her reputation sharp. They were going to hear it from me. And they were going to choke on their expectations. But fate had other plans. Because 2 days before I could make my announcement, Camille decided to host a dinner party at my parents' house. It was supposed to be casual, she said, just some close friends from her old Georgetown circle passing through town. She even invited me. Probably out of guilt. Or performance. I should have known better. Because what started as a bland dinner turned into the scene that would haunt me for weeks. It was after dessert. I was in the kitchen rinsing wine glasses and quietly stacking plates while everyone else was in the dining room laughing about Ivy League professors and internships and some clerkship offer Camille had turned down, because the judge wasn't high profile enough. That's when I heard it. My name. Arden's taking the scenic route through life, Camille said with a soft laugh. The table chuckled. A polite, painful sound. Someone muttered something about late bloomers. Another voice chimed in. Her friend Ashton, I think. Didn't she drop out for a bit? That's brave. I guess. Camille didn't correct him. Didn't defend me. Didn't say actually she's going to Harvard. Because she didn't know. And in that moment I decided, she wasn't going to find out from me. She was going to see it. In public. In print. In headlines if I had anything to do with it. I left early. No goodbyes. Just the bitter taste of dish soap on my fingers and a heart full of gasoline. They thought I was beneath them. They thought I was nothing. I was about to teach them the lesson of their lives. The next morning I couldn't stop replaying their voices. Every word from that dining room bounced around in my head like shrapnel. Taking the scenic route. Late bloomer. That's brave. I wanted to believe I was above it. That Harvard's letter in my desk drawer should be enough to drown them out. But it wasn't. Because it wasn't just what they said. It was the way they said it. Like I wasn't a person. Like I was a cautionary tale with a name. By the time Sunday brunch rolled around, I had decided not to bring the envelope. Not yet. Not like that. They didn't deserve my story wrapped in a red bow. They didn't get to pretend they were proud now that I'd clawed my way into something impressive. I wasn't giving them the satisfaction of pretending they always believed in me. I needed more than validation. I needed clarity. And so I waited. Kept my head down. I said nothing. But in secret I started preparing. I contacted Harvard's admissions office to confirm enrollment steps, timelines, financial aid packages. I printed out every page of the orientation packet and highlighted the sections that mattered most. Then I started working on something else. Something even bigger. You see, Blue Ridge hosted an annual statewide academic recognition ceremony. A formal black tie event where community college students with exceptional records were awarded for excellence in scholarship, leadership, and service. And this year I was nominated for the President's Scholar Award. Only one student from each campus received it. It wasn't flashy, but it mattered. Especially because the keynote speaker that year was a guest from, of all places, Harvard Law School's alumni network. It was perfect. If I won, I wouldn't have to say a word to my family. The story would write itself. My name in the program. My bio printed and passed around. Harvard mentioned in the introduction. Photos on the school's website. A recording online. Let Camille Google me. I threw myself into the preparation like it was oxygen. Pause. Final essays. Scholarship paperwork. Volunteer hours at the legal clinic where I helped translate intake forms for Spanish-speaking clients. Every detail sharpened my application for the award, and solidified my sense of self. The closer I got to it, the more I started to feel, not just angry but dangerous. Not in a reckless way. In a quiet, calculated way. Like someone who has finally figured out that they've been underestimated for far too long, and is ready to cash in on that advantage. Around this time Camille called me. Not to apologize. Not even to check in. She wanted to know if I could help Grandma with her taxes because, and I quote, "You're not super busy, right?" I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. I didn't respond. I drove to Grandma Louise's instead. Not for Camille. For Grandma. And when I got there, she smiled like she'd been waiting for me. We sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of receipts and mugs of lukewarm tea. After an hour of sorting paperwork, she looked up and said, "You've changed, Arden." I froze. "What do you mean?" "You're not trying so hard to be invisible anymore," she said gently. "I don't know what you're up to, but keep going." It hit me harder than I expected. Because Grandma Louise had always been quiet at family gatherings, half listening, half knitting, but clearly paying more attention than I thought. And in that moment I realized something else. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be a slap across the face. It was going to be a mirror. One they'd have to look into whether they liked it or not. And what they'd see there would haunt them longer than anything I could ever say. My revenge didn't start with a headline. It started with a dress. A simple black one I found at a thrift shop off Main Street, buried between two racks of forgotten cocktail gowns. It fit like it had been waiting for me. Clean lines, classic cut, the kind of thing that didn't scream for attention but demanded it anyway. I brought it home for $17. I hung it on the back of my closet door and stared at it every night while I studied. Not as a prize but as a promise. A reminder, you're not invisible anymore. The day of the awards ceremony was cold and overcast. I took the bus across town with my speech folded into a hardcover book like a secret. The building was all marble floors and echoing footsteps, and I felt everyone's eyes on me as I checked in at the front table. There were maybe 36 other nominees there. Every one of them looked more polished, more confident, more expected. Their families hovered nearby, parents snapping photos, friends offering tissues and pep talks. I was alone. But I didn't feel small. I felt ready. The ceremony itself was a blur of music and polite clapping. When they called my name, Arden Calloway, Blue Ridge President's Scholar, Class of 2026, the room actually went still for a moment. Because no one had expected that name. I walked up the steps to the podium and looked out at a sea of polite strangers. My voice shook for the first two words, then steadied. I thanked my professors, my classmates, the overworked library printers. And then I said something that made even the Harvard rep raise her head. I didn't get here because people believed in me. I got here because they didn't. And I decided to prove them wrong. When I sat back down, there was a pause before the applause. A beat of recognition. The kind that says, "We see you now." Afterward, I was approached by 3 professors I'd never met, the Harvard rep who gave me her card, and a journalist from a local education blog who asked if she could quote me. I smiled, took her pen and wrote down my name, carefully, deliberately, with a small note beneath it. Incoming Harvard Law. By Monday, the photos were up on the school's website. The quote made it into the newsletter. My name, Arden Calloway, was printed beneath a headline that read, "From overlooked to outstanding, community college student wins statewide honors, earns spot at Harvard." I didn't send it to my parents. I didn't text Camille. But I saw the read receipt pop up on the family group chat within 2 hours. And a full day later, for the first time in months, Camille messaged me. No, hey. No greeting. Just one line. "Wait, you got into Harvard?" I stared at the screen and let the silence sit for a long, delicious minute before typing my reply. Yeah. I guess I took the scenic route. The silence didn't last long. After that one-line text, Camille vanished again. No call. No congratulations. Just the familiar chill that always followed when she felt outshined. I should have expected it. But I didn't. Some part of me, stupid, naive, thought maybe this would be the thing that bridged the gap. That maybe, just maybe, she'd finally see me as her equal. Instead, she retaliated. It started small. A weird shift in how my parents spoke to me. Not cold exactly, just tight, polite, cautious, like they were waiting for a second shoe to drop. Mom called to ask if I was sure Harvard was the right fit, given how intense it might be for someone with my background. I swallowed the comment like it was glass. A week later, I found out why. Camille had been talking to them, to extended family, to people I hadn't spoken to in years, painting a very specific narrative, that I had gamed the system, that Harvard was lowering its standards, that my community college record wasn't real competition, that I'd probably drop out under pressure. She never said it to me directly. Of course not. She weaponized whispers. At Grandma Louise's birthday dinner, I watched as my Uncle Dan, who once called me a genius in the making when I was 10, said with a sympathetic tone, "Harvard's no joke, kiddo. Hope you've got a plan B." I smiled, excused myself and stood on the back porch for 20 minutes, staring into the dark while my hands shook with quiet rage. I had spent years climbing out of that hole and Camille was already trying to shovel me back in. And then came the worst part. One night, after a long shift at Steamhouse, I got a call from my academic advisor, Professor Elaine Porter. Sharp, no-nonsense kind in her own way. I respected her more than just about anyone at Blue Ridge. "Arden," she said gently. "We need to talk. There's been a complaint." My heart stopped. "A complaint?" She sighed. "It's anonymous, of course. But someone submitted concerns to the award committee suggesting that parts of your application may have been embellished. Particularly your legal clinic work." My head spun. "That's not true. I have documentation. I have hours logged." "I know," she interrupted. "I've seen your work. But the committee is obligated to follow up. They're requesting a full audit." The line went silent. All I could hear was my pulse pounding in my ears. I knew exactly who it was. I didn't have proof. But I didn't need it. Camille couldn't stand that I'd done something she hadn't. That I'd earned something she couldn't control. So she did what she always did when threatened. She tried to bury it in doubt. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call her and say all the things I'd been swallowing for years. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed up that entire night at my kitchen table, pulling every record I had. Clinic supervisor emails, official schedules, scanned copies of thank you letters from clients, timesheets, volunteer acknowledgments. Every piece of evidence that proved I had earned what I'd gotten. When I dropped it off at the committee office the next morning, I looked them in the eye and said, "I hope you look closely. Because I have nothing to hide." For a week I walked around with a knot in my chest the size of a boulder. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time my phone buzzed I felt like I might vomit. But deep down I knew something important. Camille had just fired the first real shot. She'd gone from smug to scared. Because for the first time in her life, I was the threat. And I wasn't going anywhere. The gymnasium was packed. Rows of folding chairs stretched to the back wall. Families pressed shoulder to shoulder with cell phones raised like shields, waiting to capture their child's big moment. I stood behind the curtain, my speech in one hand, the weight of 1,000 invisible battles in the other. Somewhere in the crowd, my parents sat beside Grandma Louise. My mother wore a pale blue blouse I hadn't seen in years. My dad had that restless knee bounce he got when he was nervous. Camille was there too, arms crossed, jaw tight, dressed like she belonged on a law firm billboard. Good. Let her watch. A faculty member gave a short intro I barely heard. Something about academic excellence, community leadership, and perseverance. Then, my name. Not Camille's sister. Not the one who took the long road. Just me. Arden Calloway. I stepped up to the podium. I didn't smile right away. I waited. I let the silence settle. Then I leaned into the mic and began. 4 years ago, I sat in the back of a classroom wondering if I had already failed at something I hadn't even started. I wasn't a straight A student. I didn't have a 5-year plan. And I definitely didn't have anyone asking me to give speeches. But I had something else. Hunger. And silence. The kind of silence where no one is cheering for you, where your name only comes up when someone's comparing it to someone else's. That kind of silence can crush you. Or it can forge you. Someone in the crowd stopped clapping mid-motion. I saw it happen. Saw Camille shift slightly in her chair. Good. Kept going. Community college gave me a second chance. But what I did with it, that was all me. I worked 3 jobs. I studied at midnight. I failed exams and came back harder. I sat in the library next to kids who didn't even notice me, and I built a life anyway. This fall I'll be attending Harvard Law School. On full scholarship. That was when the room gasped. Soft. Audible. I didn't pause for effect. I didn't need to. I'm not here because of perfect grades or a perfect life. I'm here because I refuse to accept the version of myself that other people wrote for me. I scanned the crowd. And then, just for a fraction of a second, my eyes locked with Camille's. She didn't look smug anymore. She looked stunned. Not angry. Not jealous. Stunned. I ended my speech the way I'd written it on that first night, when all I had was a folder of evidence and $17 left in my bank account. To anyone who's ever been the second choice, the last picked, or the person people bet against. Don't waste your breath explaining yourself. Let your success do the talking. Let them read about you. The applause hit me like a wave. Not because I needed it, but because I'd earned it. I stepped down from the stage, my legs trembling, heart pounding, head high. People reached out to shake my hand. Professors I didn't even know. Classmates I'd passed 100 times who had never learned my name. I smiled, nodded, hugged my advisor so tight I felt her lanyard dig into my collarbone. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. Camille. Standing just outside the crowd. Alone. She didn't say anything. Just looked at me, expression unreadable. For a moment I thought she might walk away. Instead she took a slow step forward and said, "Harvard, huh?" I nodded. Harvard. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, then thought better of it. "I guess I didn't know," she finally said. I didn't blink. "No," I said. "You never asked." The ceremony ended. The chairs scraped back. Families gathered in clusters, taking blurry photos, holding bouquets, crying into each other's shoulders. I slipped away. Out the side exit into the cool May evening. The sky was still light but fading, that golden hour where everything feels possible. My heels clicked against the pavement as I headed toward the edge of the parking lot, needing air, space, stillness. But just as I reached the curb I heard footsteps behind me. Arden. I turned. It was my father. His tie was loose, jacket slung over one shoulder, eyes softer than I'd seen in years. He looked human. Not like the authority figure from my childhood. Not the quiet observer who'd let Camille run the show. Just a man. My dad. Tired, proud, a little ashamed. "I read your speech again," he said. "After we got home." I waited. He looked down, then back up. I think I owe you an apology." Those words hung in the air between us, weighty and warm. "For what?" I asked, voice steady. "For not seeing it," he said. "For not seeing you. For assuming Camille's path was the only one that counted. I thought you needed structure. Pressure. A plan." He sighed. "I didn't realize what you needed was space. Belief. A chance to do it your way." I didn't respond right away. The silence wasn't awkward. It was necessary. "I never needed you to pick me over her," I finally said. "I just needed you to believe I could be picked." He nodded. "I know that now." Another pause. Then softly, "I hope you'll let us be proud of you." Out loud this time. My throat tightened but I nodded. "Just don't make it about the name," I said. "Not Harvard. Not the award. Be proud of the work. Of how I got here." He smiled, a little sad, a little relieved. "Deal." We walked back toward the building slowly, the sounds of celebration still echoing faintly inside. And that was the moment it hit me. I had never needed to prove I was better than Camille. I just needed to stop asking to be seen. Because I had already made myself undeniable. Not with spotlight moments. Not with perfect grades or Instagram posts or curated success. But with every quiet decision to keep going. To outwork the voices. To stay focused. To stop explaining and start showing. Camille would probably never admit it. But she'd seen it now. All of it. And that was enough. Not because I wanted revenge anymore. But because I didn't need it. What I needed was mine already. And no one could take it back. The Harvard blog published my speech 2 days later. A clipped, edited version with a photo of me at the podium. Back straight, chin high, eyes lit up with something I couldn't fake anymore. Conviction. It wasn't a viral moment. No trending hashtags. No headlines in national papers. But it rippled. Professors from Blue Ridge forwarded it to incoming students. My inbox filled with messages from community college kids across the country. People who said they felt invisible too until they saw my words. One girl wrote, "Your story is the reason I'm not dropping out this semester." Thank you. I cried when I read that one. Heart. Meanwhile, back home the atmosphere shifted. Camille didn't come to the graduation dinner my mom threw. She texted that she was busy. A week later I found out through a friend that she had applied to transfer her firm to DC, farther from home. From me. She hadn't reached out since the ceremony. And I was okay with that. Not out of bitterness. But because I finally understood. Camille needed to be the brightest light in every room. The moment she couldn't be, she left the room altogether. Let her. Because I wasn't trying to dim her anymore. I was just building something that didn't depend on her shadow. My parents adjusted slowly. Mom printed out the Harvard blog post and taped it to the fridge next to Camille's law school graduation photo. She started calling just to check in. Asking questions she never used to ask. Listening, not just nodding. My dad researched what Cambridge winters were like. He emailed me a link to snow boots. Grandma Louise, of course, was unfazed. "You always had it in you," she said, handing me an envelope with a check inside. "But don't spend this on books. Buy something nice. Something you don't need to justify." So I bought a new coat. Long, black, elegant. Harvard would see me coming. As for Blue Ridge, they asked me to sit on their alumni mentorship board. I said yes. Not because I needed the title, but because I wanted to be the person I never had. The person who looked a struggling student in the eye and said, "You belong here." Even when no one else says it out loud. The summer passed in a blur of planning, packing, financial paperwork. My apartment emptied out slowly. Books disappeared from shelves. Coffee mugs wrapped in newspaper. One night, I found the red envelope, the one I'd once planned to open in front of my family like a declaration of war. I didn't need it anymore. I slipped it into the recycling bin without a second thought. My war was over. And I had won. I arrived in Cambridge on a gray afternoon in late August. The air smelled like wet concrete and possibility. As I wheeled my suitcase across the cobblestone paths of Harvard Yard, I passed students in crisp button-downs and branded hoodies, all talking about their summer clerkships and fellowships and when I was at Yale. And for a moment that familiar voice crept in, the one I thought I'd buried back in Virginia. "You don't belong here." But it didn't land the same way. Because another voice, louder, steadier, rose to meet it. "You built this." I found my dorm. Unpacked slowly. Hung up my new coat. Taped my award certificate inside my closet door where no one would see it but me. Not because I needed to prove anything anymore. But because I wanted to remember. Remember the nights I cried over textbook pages. Remember the way silence can feel like suffocation. Remember how many people told me I wouldn't make it. And how many of them are now watching from the sidelines. This wasn't just about Harvard. It never was. This was about becoming someone I could be proud of, with or without applause. Camille's voice, my parents' doubt, the stares, the silence. All of it was part of my foundation. I stopped trying to erase it. I let it stand. Not as the reason I succeeded, but as the reason I chose to succeed on my own terms. Because the truth is, revenge isn't always about burning things down. Sometimes it's about outgrowing the space they tried to keep you in, so completely that they don't even recognize you when you walk by. And that's the sweetest kind of justice.